Inside Kurt Cobain's dark final days. News UK, Michelle Linson/Redferns. For 6 days in April of 1994, was missing. Despite being one of the biggest rock stars in the world at the time, for the better part of a week, the frontman for Nirvana was nowhere to be found. Police were on the hunt. N34. Kurt hadn't called. Lanegan was right. Something real bad. On April 8, 1994, Cobain went from N34. Missing N34 to N34. On that fateful Friday morning, an electrician named Gary Smith arrived at Cobain's Seattle home to install a security system. And when he entered with a high concentration of heroin and traces of Valium in his bloodstream, the medical examiner determined that, despite the desperate hunt to find him, Cobain's body had been lying there for about 2 days. A seemingly Barry King/Wire image. By the time Nirvana shot to the top of the charts with the release of their first major label album, Nevermind, their second overall in 1991, selling over 10 million copies worldwide and propelling Cobain and his bandmates, bassist Chris Novoselic and drummer, to uneasy global fame, the frontman was already hurtling down a dangerous path. Left broken by his parents' divorce in 1975 when he was just 8 years old, Cobain's life turned to one of rebellion. It's what made his music. N34. I always knew there, she added, N34. It ended up being Cobain's troubles first became public in August 1992 when a Vanity Fair article claimed that Love had used heroin while pregnant with Frances. She denied the claim. Terry McGinnis/Wire image. Nevertheless, the trouble kept coming. 1993 saw Cobain endure multiple overdoses and a domestic assault arrest following an argument between him and Love over guns. The three firearms. Following a North American tour, the band headed to Europe the following February. After a March 1, he was rushed to the hospital, where he remained in a coma for 20 hours. 50 of the Rohypnol pills, which must be individually unwrapped, were found in his stomach. As Love later told, after 3 days spent in the hospital, Cobain was released and allowed to return home to Seattle to recuperate. N34. I saw Kurt the day. Michelle Linson/Redferns. On March 18, Love summoned police to their Seattle home yet again, telling them that Cobain had locked himself in a room with a .38 caliber revolver and said he would kill himself. Officers would go on. At this point, Love and the other prominent figures in Cobain's life had begun the planning stages of an intervention, hoping that they might get through to a man whose drug use had reached such dangerous levels that death seemed inevitable. On March 20, while his wife had hoped that Cobain would check into a Los Angeles rehab with her, by the end of the day, Love was alone on a plane heading south. A day later, as Carlson told Rolling Stone, Cobain showed up at his condo on March 30, seeking his friend's help to secure a gun because there were trespassers on his property. Or so he claimed. N34. He seemed normal. N34. He was going out. Kevin Mazur Archive 1/Wire image. The police theory is that Cobain returned to his house, dropped the firearm off, and then left Seattle. After arriving according to one of Cobain's visitors at the clinic, who spoke to Arsane 1994 but remained anonymous, N34. I was ready to see. Cobain made his way back to Lax and flew home to Seattle, ceded to Guns N' Roses musician Duff McKagan, who later said that he knew from N34. All of my instincts that something was wrong. N34. After learning head, on April 2 and 3, there were various sightings of Cobain throughout Seattle, but no one could track him down. On April 4, the timeline constructed by police suggests that Cobain wandered throughout town with little agenda, outside of possibly stopping by a gun shop for more ammo, before barricading himself inside the greenhouse above his garage on April 5. Once inside, sadly, Grant wouldn't arrive in Seattle until April 6, N34. I was working with an Kevin Mazur/Wire image. With Cobain missing, police in Beverly Hills were called to Love's hotel room on April 7, responding to a 911 call about a N34 possible overdose victim. N34. She was taken to. News of Cobain's death was first reported by Seattle's KXRX-FM radio station, after a co-worker of Smith's called in claiming to have the N34 scoop of the century, N34. Adding, N34. Broadcasting this, a public vigil was held at a park at Seattle Center 2 days after Cobain's body was found. A crowd of in the years since Cobain chose to take his life, his death has remained a subject of curiosity for some. There are those who believe. In 2013, a spokesperson for the Seattle Police Department said that they get at least one request per week, mostly through Twitter, to reopen the investigation. As a result, N34. There are some people, as the beat poet William S. Burroughs, whom Cobain considered a hero and whom met the musician months before his death, remarked following his passing, N34. It wasn't an act of